When it comes to distraction, people often think of social media. And I admit there are a lot of folks out there misusing social media just to avoid facing things in life. Okay, that's obvious. There are also people dumping negative energy through social media. I've witnessed this on YouTube a lot. Many bots, or often not bots, but often people make spam accounts and they load their negativity in your comment section just because they can't stand that you have your prosperity and your influence. But this video is not about that, okay? We know the social media, whether it's quote-unquote professional social media or personal social media or entertainment social media or dating social media, whatever type of social media it is. Social media is often misused by commoners. That's obvious. However, do not think that it's social media that changed people into these lifeless zombies that avoid reality. Because commoners used to be lifeless zombies throughout human history. It's just that the distractions were a bit different because you had different technology. Today, you have instant communication due to the internet. So that's why the avoidance mentality of commoners is seen clearly for what it is, because they can avoid things instantly. In the past, they avoided things in a more delayed fashion, but they were avoiding things in the past as well as today. So don't fall into this hype. Social media ruined relationships with people. Relationships were ruined throughout history. It's just that social media, also because you can record violence and post it online, you can see the violence. In the past, when there was violence, you may see a bruise on someone or someone may have died and that's it. But today, if you have hidden cameras, you can see the violence for how horrible it is. But that violence was always around. Okay? Now look, this video is not about social media distractions. I want to talk about distraction in general, but especially societal distractions. And to use an example, I'm going back to the 1870s. In the decade of the 1870s, you had the French Empire that turned into a French Republic. They got rid of Napoleon III. At the same time, you had the Kingdom of Prussia that attacked France and established the German Empire. And the German Empire became the decision maker on mainland Europe. The decision maker worldwide was Britain, but in mainland Europe, when it came to terrestrial affairs, it were the Germans. So this meant an enormous change for the Netherlands, whose population was low, because now they had to deal with this huge economic power besides them, and it meant economically that for their trade on mainland Europe, they depended on the Prussians, who led the German Empire, because the German Empire contained out of the Kingdom of Prussia, Kingdom of Bavaria, Kingdom of Württemberg, you had all these kingdoms and duchies that were part of the German Empire. So it were a collection of German-speaking nations that formed a unity. So there was a big change in the beginning of the 1870s. You also had that in the colonies, the Netherlands were forced to implement the abolishment of slavery. Because the British Empire abolished slavery long before, but the Netherlands didn't really want to comply, but now they had to do it. And also, not only in Suriname and in the Dutch Antilles, but also in the East Indies, in Dutch East India, which later became Indonesia, you had Javanese, people from Java, that received land again, and they were even allowed to start their own plantation. So private enterprises had to be permitted by the Dutch under pressure of the British. So at the time, because they couldn't make use of blacks as slave labor anymore, neither could they use pressure on the Malay people in the Dutch East Indies, so they began to import cheap labor from South Asia or what do they call India, and from China. Okay? So the slavery just shifted. So all these things that were going on had an effect on Dutch society at the time. And there was a big conflict between the Roman Catholics and the Protestants. This conflict worked out in the politics as well as economics. So there were conflicts in the Netherlands. Also, there was this change going on all around them that affected them, and as a tiny country with a very small army, and they had a king. That was King William III, and Dutch is Willem III. He was not that popular, and there was this conflict concerning Luxembourg, because the King of the Netherlands was also the Grand Duke of Luxembourg. So there were all these things were going on. And remember that the fact that they had to implement the abolishment of slavery under pressure of Britain implied that there was a shift in the economy. So things they could receive for free at the expense of slave labor could not happen anymore. So you had all these things going on in the 1870s, both in the international relations as well as local. And during that time, there was this media hype concerning this guy, Hendrik Jut. Okay, I'm going to tell the story very briefly. He was born in 1851. He was an illegitimate child of a woman. There's no explanation what that meant. That she had the child outside of wedlock, or was she married, but she had an affair and she had the Hendrik, whatever it was, she was a single mom of this boy. Okay? This guy grew up in The Hague. He was born in The Hague, grew up, and he joined the military. And he was appointed at Haarlem. Now, this guy fell off a horse. He was wounded so badly that he couldn't function properly anymore in the military, so they fired him from the military. He then went to Rotterdam to get a job at a hotel. And at the time, hotels were considered a new phenomenon in the late 19th century, so it was big business. So he got a job over there. But later, he moved to The Hague, where he had another job. And while he was in The Hague, he met a woman, Christina, who was a single mom of 2 dead babies, because she had 2 stillborn babies, but she wasn't married. So the couple got involved and Christina became pregnant. But this Hendrik was fired from his job. So the couple they had a financial crisis. But this Christina worked for a rich widow who had this tendency to show off her jewelry and her wealth. So the couple decided, we're going to rob her. This Hendrik began to paint in the street where the widow lived for a while, just to observe her. So he observed the behavior of the widow when she was at home, when she would go outside, when the lights would turn off and she went to sleep. So he observed her for a while. Okay? Then he and his girlfriend, pregnant girlfriend, they approached the maid of the house. They stabbed her. And then Hendrik went upstairs to tell the widow that the maid fell and is injured. So the widow came down because the widow was concerned about her maidservant, and they killed the widow also. So then they went through the house, took away all the expensive jewelry. There were also shares of businesses that they took with them. So they took the documents of the financial assets with them. The couple went to Rotterdam, boarded a ship to New York. In New York, they sold all the jewelry and they sold the assets, and they got around $10,000 or something near that. Now, $10,000 back then was a lot of money. Okay? So when they were in New York, instead of staying there, they returned back to the Netherlands very quickly. So they ended up in a place called Vught. So let me look it up for you. Vught. Even today, it's a small town in the Netherlands. And in this province of the Netherlands is quite Roman Catholic. So back then it was also quite Roman Catholic, and it was considered, it was like a small village. Okay, I want to halt here for a moment. From The Hague to went to Rotterdam, they boarded a ship all the way to New York, where they cashed the loot, turned back to the Netherlands, and they went to a remote village. Now just think about it for a moment. If you have all this money with you that you can't account for, why would you go and live in a place that's like an extended village? Don't you know people are going to ask questions? For some reason, the couple left to South Africa. So let me hold on. So they went to South Africa. At that time, South Africa consisted out of the Crown Colony, some African kingdoms that weren't annexed yet, and you had the Transvaal Republic. The Transvaal Republic was a Dutch-speaking republic in South Africa because the descendants of Dutch colonial migrants, they were the ones leading the republic. Okay, and later the descendants of those Dutch colonial migrants were called Boers. That's how they're called today. That's where Afrikaans come from. Okay, that's why the language Afrikaans is similar to Dutch. Okay, and there was prosperous trade between Transvaal, the Portuguese colonies, and South Asia, which was governed by Britain by then. So the couple had enough opportunities to settle there and to remain. Whether they remained in the Cape Colony as well in Transvaal, they had opportunities, but for some reason they returned back to the Netherlands and settled in Rotterdam, where Hendrik purchased a coffee house. Or you can call it a coffee shop today. I'm not talking about wheat, but just a coffee shop. Now think about this. Rotterdam functioned as an international harbor even back then. So there was traffic between Rotterdam and the United States and other places. So there were wealthy people coming there. So it was a good place to cover up the origin of the wealth. But look at this. This guy was in the military. He became disabled because he fell off a horse. More people fall from horses, but the accident was so bad that he was discarded by the military. Okay? So he had jobs, probably couldn't walk that well. He was now in Rotterdam and he purchased a coffee house. And people began to ask, how come this guy became so wealthy? Obviously, the hotel where he worked, or the environment where he worked in Rotterdam, the people knew him. So even though Rotterdam was a good way to launder your money, it wasn't a wise decision. He could have gone to Amsterdam, or he could have gone to places over here, but he went to Rotterdam. Now, the guy became friends with a guy called Jan Roels, and he confessed to Jan Roels eventually that he became wealthy by killing the widow. And this Jan Roels informed the authorities, and both Hendrik and his wife, because they were married already then, they were arrested. By the way, they had a little girl, alright? The second child, second pregnancy of her, the baby was stillborn. But now look at this. How did they convict those two criminals? They found a letter they found a correspondence between the widow and her husband. Hold on a minute. If you made all that effort to go all the way to the United States to cash in the loot, and says that in order you sold the loot to get money, why did you keep a letter from the widow a letter could be used as proof against you. You went all the way to the United States, you moved all around, you also had the baby back then, and you went to South Africa and back, but you kept a letter from the widow whom you've murdered? Come on, that's a bit weird. After conviction, the locals demanded the death penalty because the media made a whole hype of this story, and the Dutch people became very emotional about it. They didn't demand the death penalty for the woman, means the wife, even though the wife was a compliance in the crime. But, okay, the guy received a life sentence because the death penalty was abolished in 1870. So, the guy was later transferred to a prison complex in Leeuwarden, this all the way over here, because the authorities feared a lynching taking place. How could he be lynched if he was in jail already? Okay, that's another weird thing. 2 years later, in 1878, he died in prison. How did he die? Was it suicide? Was he killed by other prisoners? What was it? No explanation. After he died, he became a folk legend in The Hague. And today, you have a carnival attraction called Kop van Jut, means the head of Jut, or Jut's head, I think it is called in British English. It's a carnival attraction. Just Google it, you'll see it. And here's another thing. He became a part of the historical heritage of The Hague. And the crime scene was even preserved throughout the generation. Now, not the blood spatters and all of that, but the place where it happened was preserved. The Hague is, as you know, changed over time. They built new neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods they demolished, but they preserved the crime scene. I mean, come on. You have this guy who became a murderer, who was a scammer. He is sentenced to life. He dies in jail. The people couldn't stand him, yet he becomes a popular legend? Are you kidding me? And why did the authorities throughout time preserve the crime scene, the location? Something doesn't add up with this story. And here's the thing. Several years back, when I was on an excursion in Amsterdam, I still studied cultural anthropology then, for my bachelor's degree. There was this case that we all received at the beginning at the excursion. It was from the late 19th century. It concerned the murder of a farmer in which three brothers were arrested. One was released, the other two remained in prison. But there was zero evidence that pointed to the guilt of those two brothers. There were clues that other people were involved. Yet those clues were not taken into consideration. There was a lawyer who was involved in the case, and he was also a politician. He was a famous politician back then. He tried to get the brothers out of jail, but it didn't work. And here's the thing. Apart from the case of those two brothers, and by the way, those two brothers were also detained to Leeuwarden. In this case, there was also a lawyer involved who also was a politician, because he later became the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. So hold on a minute. You have this case in the 1870s, and you have another case a little bit later, in the late 19th century. In both cases, there are lawyers involved that became politicians, and people don't see a connection. In both cases, the mainstream media of the time jumped on them. Okay? And remember, there aren't such things as coincidences. During the time of this case of Hendrik Jut, there was social change going on in the Netherlands, and the social change, it brought social unrest. So the people now, instead of losing it against each other, lost it against this perpetrator over here. So now the population received a bad guy to vent their anger on. This picture is from 1878, the year he died. Now, some may say, Rashid, this is like a post-mortem picture. He probably died and then they washed the corpse, put clothes on him, put it on a standard and took the picture. Maybe that's the case. I'm not sure. But look at this. You have an axe over here. What does the axe refer to? The beast, Apollo. You have what appears to be black and white over here. Anyway, light versus dark over here. Light versus dark, so that's duality. That's Freemasonry. And remember, his lawyer was a Freemason also. So it seems to me that either this guy really did what he did, but the mainstream media, they took advantage of the matter to distract the population, or this thing is a hoax. It didn't actually happen, but it was just fabricated to distract the population, or this guy was the scapegoat of the political tensions that were going on between the Roman Catholics and the Protestants. There were more crimes happening in the Netherlands at the time. There were more, there were kidnappings, there were hostage situations, some of them even involving children. So if they wanted to use a crime to really shock the people, they could have easily selected one of those other crimes which involves children, which was far more graphic than this one over here. And they could have used that. Why did they use him to distract the people? It's because they needed an effective distraction for the population. That's what they needed. Okay? With all the social unrest was going on, due to all the changes in the economy and also in politics, the fact that they had a king that was not popular. By the way, King William III was even called King Gorilla, due to his anger issues. So all of these things were going on, and then you had Hendrik Jut, the quote-unquote piece of trash from The Hague that killed the poor elderly lady and another woman, and even forced his wife, his later wife, to be involved. He was a horrible father with a lot of bad luck in his life, and thus society would be better off without him. That was the thinking concerning this guy. Especially, that was what the leaders needed at the time. So why am I talking about this case in this video? While this video is about distractions, just realize this. Anytime you hear a report from the media, or anytime there is some rumor going on in society, look at the context. Look at the timing. What's going on at the moment? Which context is it? When you see the context, you'll see quickly if the story adds up or not. And I pointed out already, there are things that don't add up with this story. It's way too convenient, and it's way too illogical. Just think for a moment. You arrive in Rotterdam to board a ship to the Americas. You need to have your documentation with you, okay? And you have to carry all that jewelry with you and all those documents. Nobody checks your baggage. And when you arrive in the United States, you are selling those shares, those financial assets. You need to have a legal representative to sell an asset. For example, if Kevin owned 12 assets in a coffee company, and someone wants to sell those assets, they need to have a written declaration by the owner of the assets as well as the legal representative, so let me say before they can sell it. You can't just come with a piece of paper and sell it to someone. Because if that someone purchases a piece of paper and they want to cash the money from the asset, they will say, hold on a minute, you're not assigned to do this. So that part of the story is already weird. And think about it, you have this pregnant woman who later gave birth, so they're traveling around with a little baby across the seas. I'm not saying it's not possible, but where's the motherly instinct of the woman thinking, okay, I had 2 miscarriages already. This is my first child that succeeded in being born. A mother who went through 2 miscarriages, I'm not a woman so I can't relate to it, but a mother who went through 2 miscarriages and she has her first baby would say, hold on a minute, Hendrik, I don't want to live like this. I want a good future for our daughter. Come on, we have money. You don't have to work for a while. Just settle somewhere and let's start a life. Okay? Okay, look. This story is quite illogical. I already discussed this. Just realize that anytime the leaders of a community want to distract the population, they will come with such stories. Stories that provoke emotions of people. Okay? That's why always look at the context of a matter. And there is another thing I want to point out, and that has nothing to do with this guy, okay? When you encounter difficulty in your life, especially then you need to look at the timing and the context. Don't just think, why does this happen to me? Like many people do. Look at the context. Let's say that you were suddenly fired from a job. Multiple people was fired from a job suddenly. Okay? And now you are on welfare for 2 months before you get another job. But then you realize, hold on a minute. What was going on before this happened? And then you begin to think that, hold on a minute. I had an auntie that became upset with me out of the blue. And then you look further and you realize that let me say 2 weeks before you were fired, until the day you were fired, there were colleagues that suddenly began to share with you how upset they were with other colleagues. So now you remember that a toxic environment developed on the workplace. And you realize that after you lost your job, you didn't tell anyone, suddenly your aunt began to call you several times. And now you think, if that aunt turned on me out of the blue, why is she calling me now, several days after I lost my job? And you think that's quite weird that your aunt became upset with you without any good explanation, without any good reason, and soon afterwards there was contention at your workplace. And you were fired, and then afterwards she begins to call you. So now you see a pattern. And this is what was going on. Your auntie did not want to face things. But you're the type of individual that moves on in life. And your aunt saw this and she became upset because it reflected back onto her, and she began to see her own cowardice. And she didn't want to see her cowardice, so she projected onto you. So this auntie, out of envy and jealousy, she went to a clairvoyant to find out stuff about you. And the demons revealed that you would get a promotion very soon, and financially you would increase. So the auntie afterwards went to some voodoo practitioner to put a hex on you. The hex worked in causing contention at the workplace. That happened quite easy. It was quite easy for the demons to cause, because those people there are easy tools for demons to use, because they don't look at the bigger picture. They're worldly people with all kinds of issues that the demons can use. So while that was going on, because you walked by faith, because you prayed all the time, the hex turned around in your favor, that you were freed from that toxic environment. So the toxic environment came into existence that was caused by the hex, by the paranormal activity. But because you walked by faith, it backfired in your favor. So you were now fired from the workplace that was toxic. So you did not become a target. And later on, you got another job where you earned far better than before. So the promotion that was coming for you was just relocated. It was not destroyed. It was not taken from you. It was just relocated. But here's the thing. If you would have paid too much attention to the fact that you've been fired unfairly, you may you may have frustrated the blessing that was about to manifest on your behalf. And sometimes it happens to believers that some blessings are frustrated because they've been distracted by what they say in the world bad luck. There's no such thing as bad luck, but there was paranormal contention against them, and the believer was too distracted by the paranormal contention. They didn't look at the context. Now, let's say now that a similar thing, like in this parable, happened to you, but you look at the context and you clearly see a pattern. What do? Remain in prayer. Pray more than ever before. Forgive people for the harm they did unto you. That's your attitude. They still need to repent. Enforce repercussions on all evil against you. And keep on going. Especially keep on going. In this case, in the parable I just gave unto you, the promotion was relocated to another location through other means, but the promotion still came. And that's what you need to understand. Anytime anything good is on its way to you, or anytime anything good unfolds for you, you will have people that will retaliate against it because it's not happening to them. That's how a lot of people are. If it's not happening to them on their terms, they become upset when it happens to someone else and it's not in their control. So people will resist, but also demons will stir up people against you to distract you from the benefit that you received. You often are not aware that you received this benefit. That's why the demons come with all that distraction. It can be that you are on social media and you never receive messages from people. You may have 200-300 people in your friend list, or if you're on Instagram, you may have 80 followers or whatever. They never say anything to you. They barely like your stuff. Suddenly, they begin to like all of your stuff. They begin to comment a lot. They even begin to send you direct messages or private messages. And then you think, whoa, what happened? And then you sit down and you think about it and you realize, something is going on. And later you find out that a debt you had faced the statute of limitations, so the debt was cancelled. So the bailiffs couldn't charge you anymore nor approach you because the case expired. But some of the bailiffs still wanted to make their move. So the bailiffs who are pagans, they put a hex on you that caused you to be distracted by all that social media attention. The purpose was for you to be overwhelmed and happy with all the attention that you would lower your guards down, your spiritual guard, and then suddenly the debt collectors would come with their threats and you would be overwhelmed by the threats. While being overwhelmed, you would become anxious, and once you're anxious, they could easily victimize you. Even though the debt was cancelled because the case was expired, they still wanted to charge you. So let's say the case would expire on the 5th of September, and it's now August, so now they realize that within a half month, the case will expire, we can't do anything anymore, so let's put a hex on the guy. And it will lead to him being distracted. While he's distracted, after a week, we'll make our move so that before the 5th of September, we can still rob him. But it didn't work because you were alert. So always check the timing and the context, okay? Keep agreement with Christ. Be at peace.